Hey folks, buckle up, because today we're diving into one of the most thrilling chapters of American history, the secret missions during World War II that straight up changed everything. I'm talking about operations. So hush hush. They stayed buried in classified files for decades. These weren't your typical battlefield clashes. They were clever, high-stakes gambles that outsmarted the enemy and saved countless lives. As Americans, we take pride in our ingenuity and grit, and these stories showcase that like nothing else. From the deserts of New Mexico to the frozen wilds of Norway, U.S. forces pulled off feats that tipped the scales against the Axis powers. And get this, many of these missions involved everyday heroes, scientists, artists, even missionaries turned spies. We'll explore how they shaped the war's outcome, all while keeping it real and factual for you history buffs out there. Let's kick things off with the granddaddy of all secret projects, the Manhattan Project. This wasn't just some covert op. It was a colossal effort that redefined warfare forever. Back in 1939, with Hitler rampaging across Europe, Albert Einstein penned a letter to President Roosevelt warning about the Nazis' potential to harness atomic energy. That sparked a race we couldn't lose. By 1942, the U.S. launched the Manhattan Project, led by General Leslie Groves and scientific genius J. Robert Oppenheimer. Over 130,000 people worked on it, scattered across remote sites like Los Alamos, New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. These folks lived in total isolation, no spilling secrets, even to family. Towns popped up overnight, complete with fake addresses to dodge enemy spies. The goal? Build an atomic bomb before Germany did. Scientists cracked uranium enrichment and plutonium production, overcoming insane technical hurdles. Security was ironclad. Background checks, wiretaps, the works. Then came the Trinity test on July 16, 1945, a blinding flash in the Alamogordo Desert, equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT. Oppenheimer later recalled it with a haunting quote from ancient scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." That explosion proved it worked. Fast forward to August 1945. Little boy hit Hiroshima on the 6th. Fat man Nagasaki on the 9th. Japan surrendered days later, ending the Pacific War without a bloody invasion that could have cost 1,000,000 American lives. Sure, the moral weight is heavy. The bombs killed over 200,000 civilians, but in the brutal math of war, it saved more in the long run. The project didn't just win, it ushered in the nuclear age, shifting global power dynamics forever. But the Manhattan Project was just one piece. Up next in our series, we'll uncover the Ghost Army, a band of creative misfits who tricked the Nazis with fake tanks and phony radio chatter, pulling off deceptions that saved thousands. Stick around. This is American history at its most badass. Okay, picture this. It's 1944. The Allies are gearing up for D-Day, and the Germans have 500,000 troops waiting behind the Atlantic Wall. Everyone knows the invasion is coming, but nobody knows where. The fate of the free world is hanging on one question: can we trick Hitler into looking the wrong way long enough to get a foothold in France? Enter the most unlikely unit in the entire U.S. Army, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. 1,000 guys, most of them artists, designers, actors, and sound engineers straight out of New York and Philadelphia art schools. These weren't soldiers in the classic sense. They were painters, sculptors, Broadway set designers, and audio wizards. Handed a top-secret mission: become the greatest illusionists the world has ever seen. Their weapons? Inflatable tanks, fake artillery, sound trucks blasting recordings of entire armored divisions on the move, and pure theatrical genius. The unit was the brainchild of two officers who understood that deception could save more lives than bullets. They recruited from places like Pratt Institute and the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. One recruit, fashion designer Bill Blass, yes, that Bill Blass, later said he joined because it sounded more interesting than peeling potatoes. The Ghost Army carried dummy M4 Sherman tanks made of rubber that weighed less than a motorcycle. From 1,000 feet up, they looked real. They had fake airplanes, fake landing craft, even fake laundry hanging on clotheslines to make ghost camps look lived in. When they rolled into a French village, local kids would run up yelling "Les Américains," and the soldiers had to shush them because officially, no Americans were supposed to be there. They'd set up in a forest at night, inflate a couple hundred tanks before sunrise, then play pre-recorded sound effects, engines revving, tracks clanking, sergeants barking orders, all pumped through massive speakers that could be heard 15 miles away. Meanwhile, a handful of real tanks would drive in circles, kicking up dust to complete the illusion. German reconnaissance planes flew overhead, took photos, and reported entire divisions that simply didn't exist. Their biggest show came right after D-Day. Operation Fortitude had convinced Hitler that Patton was massing 1 million men for an invasion at Pas-de-Calais. The Ghost Army kept that lie alive for weeks. They spoofed radio traffic using a technique called spoof radio, where operators imitated the exact cadence of real units they'd studied. German intelligence swallowed it whole. Hitler kept 2 armored divisions and over 200,000 troops sitting at Calais, waiting for an army that was never coming. By the time the Germans figured it out, the real breakout from Normandy was unstoppable. The Ghost Army pulled off 22 separate deception operations across Europe. Historians now estimate they saved between. Imagine it's February 1943, deep inside Nazi-occupied Norway. On a frozen plateau 6,000 feet above sea level, sits a fortress-like factory called Vemork. It looks harmless, just hydroelectric pipes and concrete buildings clinging to a cliff. In reality, it's the only place on Earth producing heavy water in serious quantities. The key ingredient: Hitler needs to build an atomic bomb. If Germany gets the bomb first, the war is over, and we lose. British intelligence knows this. They've already tried once to take Vemork out. Operation Freshman, 2 gliders, 41 Royal Engineers. Both gliders crashed in the blizzard. The survivors were captured, tortured, and executed. Total disaster. London now realizes commandos can't fight their way in. The plant is guarded by elite troops, searchlights, minefields, and a 600-foot ice-covered gorge with a single suspension bridge. The only way left is a suicide mission. Enter 9 Norwegian commandos, trained by the British SO, working hand in glove with the American OSS, the future CIA. These guys are hardcore skiers, mountaineers, resistance fighters, who've been living in the mountains for months, eating reindeer moss to stay alive. Their leader, Joachim Renneberg, is 23 years old. On the night of February 22, 1943, they do the impossible. They ski 30 miles in a whiteout, drop 1,000 feet down a sheer ravine the Germans thought was unclimbable, cross an ice-choked river, climb back up the other side, cut through barbed wire, and sneak into the heavily guarded plant while the guards are watching a movie. Inside the basement, they plant explosives on the 18 high-concentration heavy water cells. They use British-made charges with the 30-second fuse, short enough that they can still escape, but long enough that no German gets suspicious. Boom! 3,000 pounds of precious heavy water gone in a flash. No alarm sounds. The commandos ski 250 miles to neutral, Sweden through waist-deep snow while the entire German garrison wakes up and starts hunting them. Every single Norwegian makes it out alive. 0 casualties on our side. The Germans never even find their ski tracks. Hitler's nuclear program is set back by at least a year, too. When American bombers finally hit the plant in November 43, there's nothing left worth bombing. The heavy water equipment gets loaded onto a ferry in early 1944 for shipment to Germany, and Norwegian resistance sinks it in Lake Tinch with another perfectly placed charge. Game over for the Nazi bomb. Years later, when the CIA declassified the files, they called Operation Gunnerside the most successful act of sabotage in all of World War II. A grand total of 9 guys, armed with nothing heavier than plastic explosives and guts, stopped Hitler from getting the ultimate weapon. And the best part, the leader, Joachim Renneberg, lived quietly in Norway until 2018, always saying, "We just did what we had to do." That. Most people think the war for scientists started after VE Day, with Operation Paperclip scooping up Wernher von Braun and his rocket team. Truth is, the US was already running a secret program in the middle of the war, and it was happening in one of the most godforsaken places on the planet, the Aleutian Islands, Alaska. June 1942, the Japanese have just bombed Dutch Harbor and seized the islands of Attu and Kiska. Suddenly, the North Pacific is a shooting war, and the US military realizes it knows basically nothing about the weather up there. Aleutian storms can flip from clear skies to 100 knot winds and zero visibility in minutes. Planes crash, ships disappear, men freeze to death inside their own tents. If we're going to take those islands back and keep them, we need accurate forecasts, fast. Enter a quiet, brilliant meteorologist from Caltech named Dr. Carl Gustav Rossby. Yes, the same guy the Rossby waves are named after. He convinces the Army Air Forces that the only way to crack Aleutian weather is to get real-time data from the one place the enemy can't stop us, Siberia. That's right. In 1943, while we're technically still allies with Stalin, the Pentagon launches a black operation codenamed Project W-15. American crews secretly fly modified B-24 Liberators across the Bering Strait, land at unmarked Soviet airfields near Providencia and Anadyr, and swap weather data with Red Army officers who've been ordered to look the other way. The planes are stripped of all markings, fly at night, and the pilots are told if they go down over Russia, they never existed. Every day, raw observations from the heart of Siberia flow straight to a hidden forecast center in a Quonset hut on a Dak island. American meteorologists combine it with their own balloon soundings, and suddenly, the fog lifts, literally. For the first time, commanders know when the infamous Williwaw winds are coming. The reconquest of Attu in May 1943 and Kiska in August goes off with almost no weather-related losses. Compare that to the earlier disasters where entire squadrons vanished. But the program does something even bigger. Those secret flights prove that transpolar air routes are possible. The data collected becomes the foundation for the Great Circle routes that win the air war over Europe and later shrink the post-war world. When the Cold War starts 5 years later, the same paths become the front line for SAC bombers and U-2S. The whole operation stays classified until the 1990s. Most of the American pilots and weathermen took the secret to their graves. Even today, the Russians barely acknowledge it happened. But next time you look at a modern weather map and see those perfect jet stream curls, remember, a handful of brave flyers and nerds in parkas, sneaking into Stalin's backyard while bullets were still flying, gave us the eyes we needed to win 2 wars, one hot, one cold. Long before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Navy believed its codes were unbreakable. They called their main diplomatic cipher Purple and the Naval Operational Code JN-25. Both were supposed to be harder than anything the world had ever seen. They were wrong, because one quiet American missionary turned spy in Tokyo had already handed the keys to the United States Navy. Meet Joseph Grew, U.S. Ambassador to Japan, and his secret weapon, a soft-spoken Episcopal missionary from Virginia named Rev. Dr. John C. Winkler. In 1937, Winkler was running a tiny English language school inside the American Embassy compound. What nobody outside, a handful of people knew was that Winkler had spent years cultivating Japanese telegraph clerks, maids who cleaned admirals' offices, even a disgruntled cipher officer's wife. Every week, scraps of paper, half-burned code sheets, and carbon copies found their way into Winkler's hands. Those scraps went straight to a locked room in the embassy basement, the American version of Britain's famous Room 40, a team of Navy cryptanalysts, led by the legendary Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rockefort. Yes, the same guy who later cracked Midway, worked around the clock with early IBM punch card machines, By 1940, they had built a working replica of Japan's Purple, machined from nothing but trash can, fragments, and pure brainpower. In February 1941, 9 months before Pearl Harbor, they were reading Japan's top-level diplomatic traffic faster than most Japanese ambassadors. The intercepts painted a terrifying picture. Japan was running out of oil, planning a southward strike, and lying through its teeth in every negotiation. Washington knew war was coming. They just didn't know exactly when or where. Those purple decrypts shaped Roosevelt's entire Pacific strategy: embargoes, fleet movements to Hawaii, secret reinforcements to the Philippines, everything. But the real crown jewel came from JN-25. Starting in early 1942, Rockefeller's team in a damp basement at Pearl Harbor Station Hypo began breaking the Japanese Navy's operational code. By May, they knew Admiral Yamamoto was planning a giant trap at a place called Midway. The rest is legend. 4 Japanese carriers sunk. The turning point of the Pacific War, all because a missionaries' underground network and a bunch of slide rule geniuses could read the enemy's mail. After the war, the US government kept Magic the code name for all the Purple and JN-25 work, classified for another 30 years. Ambassador Grew got the credit he deserved. But Reverend Winkler quietly went back to preaching in Virginia and died in 1972 without ever telling his congregation he'd helped shorten the war by at least a year and save hundreds of thousands of American lives. April 18, 1942. 4 months after Pearl Harbor, America is still reeling. Hawaii is burning. Wake Island is gone. The Philippines are falling. And every night the radio tells families their sons are dying in places they've never heard of. Morale is in the gutter. Roosevelt wants a miracle. He wants Tokyo bombed yesterday. The problem? Japan sits 6,000 miles from the nearest American runway. No bomber on Earth can reach it and return. The Navy's answer is insane. Launch Army WW2 missiles from an aircraft carrier, something that has literally never been done. The man crazy enough to volunteer for it is Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, already a famous test pilot and absolute legend. 80 volunteers step forward, 16 planes, 5-man crews. They train in Florida on short takeoffs until they can get a 67-foot bomber off the ground in under 500 feet. Then they sail west under total secrecy aboard the brand new USS Hornet, escorted by Task Force 16 under Admiral Halsey. At a.m. on April 18th, everything goes wrong. A Japanese picket boat spots them, 650 miles from Japan, way farther out than planned. The mission is blown. The original plan was 400 miles. Now, they'll have to launch early, burn extra fuel, and probably ditch in the sea. Doolittle gives the order anyway. Let's go get 'em, boys. One by one, 16 B-25s roar off the Hornet's pitching deck in a driving rain. They fly so low the crews can see Japanese fishermen waving at what they think are friendly planes. At noon, they hit Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, and Kobe. Factories, oil tanks, and an aircraft plant go up in flames. The physical damage is light, but the psychological damage is catastrophic. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Japanese homeland is bombed. The emperor himself watches smoke rise over his palace. The myth of invincibility is shattered. Japanese radio goes silent for hours. Then lies that the raiders were all shot down. They weren't. The military panics and pulls 4 fighter groups back from the front to defend the home island's fighters. That could have been slaughtering our guys in New Guinea. Most importantly, Admiral Yamamoto now knows his fleet is too far forward. To prevent another raid, he accelerates the Midway operation by a full month, rushing into the trap we already talked about in Part 5. Midway happens because of the Doolittle raid. The war turns because 80 guys in green bombers decided to fly one way into hell. 15 crews make it to China. 1 lands in Russia. 71 men survive the war. Doolittle thinks he's failed because he lost every plane. When he gets home, Roosevelt pins the Medal of Honor on him and tells the press he bombed Tokyo. America finally has something to cheer about. That single morning in April gave the United States hope when hope was almost gone, and it forced Japan into the exact mistake that would lose them the Pacific. November 8, 1942. While most eyes are still on Guadalcanal and Stalingrad, the biggest invasion since D-Day is about to hit French North Africa. 107,000 American and British troops are steaming toward Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers. The problem? 120,000 French soldiers and sailors are waiting for them, and nobody knows which way they'll shoot. France surrendered in 1940, but these troops are loyal to Vichy and Marshal Pétain. If they fight hard, the landings could turn into a bloodbath. Enter 12 American vice consuls, who look like mild-mannered diplomats in seersucker suits, but are actually OSS officers carrying suitcases full of gold coins, revolvers, and a crazy plan. Their leader is a Wall Street lawyer turned spymaster named Robert Murphy. For 18 months, he's been running a covert network inside Algeria and Morocco, recruiting everyone from nightclub owners to Jewish resistance fighters. The star of the show is General Charles Mast, the #2 French officer in Algiers, who secretly hates the Nazis and wants France back in the fight. Murphy promises him that if he helps the Americans land without opposition, de Gaulle and Giraud will give him a top spot in the new Free French Army. The night of November 7th to 8th is pure Hollywood chaos. 400 young French resistance fighters, armed with smuggled Colt 45s, seize the main telephone exchange, the radio station, and police headquarters in Algiers. At the same time, a dozen American vice consuls, actually Colonel William Eddy, Major Ridgway Knight, and others, drive around in civilian cars cutting phone lines and arresting Vichy generals in their pajamas. One OSS team storms the villa of the Vichy commander, Admiral Darlan, who's conveniently in Algiers visiting his sick son. They hold him at gunpoint while the city quietly changes sides. By dawn, Algiers is in American hands with almost no shooting. The French fleet in the harbor never fires a shot. Casablanca and Oran are tougher. French shore batteries sink a few destroyers, and the fighting lasts 2 days. But the heart of the operation, Algiers, is already secured because of the coup Buddy saw coming. The payoff is massive. North Africa falls in 72 hours instead of weeks. Rommel's supply line across the Mediterranean is cut forever. The soft underbelly of Europe is now open. Within 6 months, 250,000 Axis troops surrender in Tunisia, the first great Allied victory of the war. Churchill later calls it the best planned large-scale operation of the war so far, and it worked because 12 guys in linen suits, armed with briefcases full of $100,000 in gold, $20 pieces, convinced an entire French army to switch sides in one night. They called themselves the 12 Apostles. History barely remembers their names, but without them, the road to Sicily, Italy, and eventually Normandy might never have opened. June 6, 1944. While the beaches of Normandy are still soaked in blood, 300 men, in small groups of 3, are quietly parachuting hundreds of miles behind German lines into France, Belgium, and Holland. They wear regular uniforms so they can't be shot as spies, but everything else about them is pure black ops crazy. They're called Jedburghs, code name for the most audacious special forces program of the war. Each team, 1 American OSS officer, 1 British SO officer, 1 Free French officer, plus a radio operator who jumps with a 70-pound set strapped to his chest. Their job? Land blind among the resistance, hand out guns, blow up trains, and turn occupied Europe into a guerrilla hell for the Germans. In the weeks before D-Day, Eisenhower's biggest fear is that Hitler will rush panzer divisions to Normandy and crush the beachhead. The Jedburgh plan is simple and brutal. Make every road, bridge, and rail line in France explode at once so the panzers can't move. They deliver. In Brittany alone, 1 3-man team led by Captain Aaron Bank, the future father of the Green Berets, links up with 5,000 Breton Maquis. In 6 weeks, they ambush 27 German convoys, derail 11 trains, and cut the main Brest-Paris rail line in 47 places. Another team in the Morvan Mountains turns 20,000 resistance fighters into a full-scale army that liberates half the region before regular Allied troops even arrive. The numbers are staggering. 93 Jedburgh teams operate across Western Europe. They arm and lead over 100,000 partisans. Official tally by Chief: 2,000 plus locomotives destroyed, 400 plus bridges dropped, and an estimated 40 German divisions delayed or diverted. Divisions that never make it to Normandy in time to stop the breakout. The cost is high. 1 out of 3 Jedburghs becomes a casualty. Some are betrayed, tortured, and executed. Others vanish into the forests and keep fighting until Liberation Day. The survivors come home with almost no recognition. The program stays classified until the 1980s. But here's the kicker: the Jedburgh concept, small, multilingual teams living with local guerrillas, becomes the exact blueprint for modern U.S. Special Forces, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. Every horse soldier riding with tribal fighters owes his playbook to those 300 guys who jumped into the dark with a suitcase full of plastic, explosives, and a welcome message from Uncle Sam. Next time you hear the Green Beret motto, "Dia presso liar," remember where it really started. 3 crazy guys in a hayloft in 1944, teaching French farmers how to blow up Nazi trains and giving Hitler the worst summer of his life. Picture Guadalcanal, August 1942. The Marines are pinned down. Radios crackling with Japanese voice impersonators shouting fake orders in perfect English. Runners get shot before they reach the next foxhole. In 20 minutes, an entire battalion is nearly wiped out because the enemy is inside our communications. Then a strange sound cuts through the static. Words that sound like wind over canyons, like rapid-fire bird calls. The Japanese monitors hear it and go silent. They have no idea what they're listening to. Within minutes, the Marines regroup, flank the enemy, and win the hill. The strange sound is Navajo, and the men speaking it just saved the day. It started with a civil engineer named Philip Johnston, raised on a Navajo reservation. He was one of the few white men fluent in the language. In early 1942, he walks into Marine headquarters at Camp Elliott with a wild idea: use Navajo as a battlefield code. The language has no written form, insanely complex grammar, and fewer than 30 non-Navajos on Earth can speak it. Perfect. The Marines recruit 29 original code talkers from the reservation, men like Corporal Henry Bay and Private First Class Chester Nez. They create a dictionary. The word for turtle, che da gahi, becomes tank. Hummingbird, da hi te hai, is fighter. Plane, ironfish beshlo, is submarine. They add an alphabet system so every letter can be spelled out if needed. The whole code is memorized. Nothing is ever written down. By Iwo Jima and Okinawa, there are over 400 code talkers in the Pacific. Every Marine division has a platoon of them. They transmit orders for artillery barrages, troop movements, airstrikes, everything. 6 code talkers at Iwo send and receive over 800 messages in the first 48 hours without a single mistake. Major Howard Connor, 5th Marine Division signal officer, later says, were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. The Japanese never break it. Not once. Their best codebreakers, educated at Stanford and USC, call it a dead language and give up. Even captured Navajo soldiers are assumed to be speaking gibberish under torture. The enemy never figures it out. The program stays classified until 1968. The men come home to a country that still won't let them vote in some states. They can't tell their own families what they did until the 1980 seconds. Finally, in 2001, President Bush awards them the Congressional Gold Medal. Chester Nez, the last surviving original, dies in 2014 at age 93, still proud that his language, once beaten out of children in government boarding schools, saved millions of lives and helped win the biggest war in history. December 16, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge has just exploded across the Ardennes. Hitler is throwing everything he's got left, his last panzer armies, his last fuel reserves, and a secret card nobody in the West even knows exists yet. The V3 high-pressure pump. The giant London death gun buried inside a chalk mountain in northern France. The V3 is insane. A 430-foot-long barrel built into the rock at MIMOX, with side chambers that fire extra charges as the shell passes, accelerating it to over 4,000 miles per hour range, 165 miles. Target: Central London, 300 rounds per hour, 24/7. Hitler plans to open it on Christmas Day 1944 and flatten half the city before anyone can react. American intelligence catches wind of something big in August 44, but nobody knows exactly what. The RAF bombs the site twice and thinks it's done. It isn't. Deep inside the hill, the Germans keep digging. Enter the most unlikely hero of the whole war, a 33-year-old OSS lieutenant from Brooklyn named George Skene Patterson. He's not a soldier, he's a mining engineer who got drafted. In November 1944, he parachutes into France with the Jedburgh team and starts asking French coal miners weird questions. Have you seen any new tunnels? One old miner remembers German engineers asking about limestone density near MIMOX. That's all Patterson needs. On December 22nd, while the bulge is raging, Patterson and a British demolition expert named Captain David Strangeways crawl through freezing drainage pipes under the German fortress. They plant 2 tons of explosives directly on the main gun tubes, light the fuses, and run. The mountain literally lifts off its foundations. When the smoke clears, the entire V3 complex is a pile of rubble. London never even knows how close it came. But that's only half the story. In the same week, Patton's Third Army is fighting for its life at Bastogne. Intelligence picks up chatter about a final German wonder weapon convoy heading west, jet-powered Me-262S, loaded with the first operational atomic dirty bombs, low-grade uranium shells, meant to poison entire Allied armies. A scratch force of P-47 Thunderbolts from the 406th Fighter Group, led by Colonel Anthony Groves, gets the intercept order on Christmas Eve. Flying through sleet and ground fire, they find the convoy near Koblenz and strafe it to pieces. The warheads never detonate, but the wreckage later proves the Nazis were months, not years, away from battlefield nukes. The bulge ends. Germany collapses. 4 months later, the 2 missions, Patterson's Underground Charge and the Christmas Eve airstrike, are buried under so many classification stamps that even most generals never hear about them until the 1990 seconds. That's how close it really was. Not years, weeks. America didn't just win World War II on the beaches or in the factories. We won it in frozen tunnels, in cockpits over the Rhine, and in 1,000 forgotten moments when ordinary guys refused to let the darkest timeline happen. By mid-1944, most Americans thought the Pacific War was just islands, Marines, and big carrier battles. The real killer was invisible, silent, and never made the newsreels. The U.S. submarine force running the greatest commerce raid in history. When the war started, our subs were a joke. Torpedoes that ran too deep or had magnetic exploders that didn't work. In the first year, we sank almost nothing. Then Admiral Charles Lockwood took over in Perth and Pearl, fixed the torpedoes, and turned loose the wolves. Codename Operation Barney. No, seriously. American submarines got unlimited hunting licenses against anything that floated under the rising sun. By 1945, there were over 200 U.S. subs on patrol. From the Aleutians to the South China Sea, they laid mines, shelled shore factories, rescued downed pilots, inserted spies, and above all, they sank ships, merchant ships, tankers, fishing boats, everything. The numbers are brutal. Japan started the war with 6 million tons of merchant shipping. By August 1945, they had less than 300,000 tons left afloat. That's a 95% kill rate. Rice stopped moving from Indochina. Oil from Borneo never reached the home islands. Steel, lure, coal, everything dried up. Factories shut down. Civilians were eating wallpaper paste and acorns. The skipper who did the most damage, Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton on USS Wahoo, then Commander Richard O'Connor on USS Tang. O'Connor sank 24 confirmed ships before Tang herself was lost to a circular running torpedo. These guys operated like pirates with presidential permission. They'd surface at night inside Tokyo Bay itself, shell coastal freighters with deck guns, then dive and disappear. The Japanese tried everything: convoy systems, depth charge barrages, patrol nets across the Tsushima Strait. Didn't matter. American codebreakers in Pearl Harbor read the convoy schedules before the Japanese escorts did. Sub-skippers got exact sailing times, routes, and cargo lists. It was like shooting fish in a barrel with the spotlight. By spring 1945, Japan's war economy was dead. The fleet sat rusting at anchor for lack of fuel. Kamikaze planes couldn't take off because there was no aviation gas. The final B-29 firebombing campaign worked so well only because there was nothing left to fight back with. When Japan surrendered, Admiral Nimitz sent a simple message to the submarine force: "You strangled Japan." Out of 52 U.S. subs lost in the war, they took 55% of all Japanese shipping with them, over 5 million tons. One submarine sailor for every 2 merchant ships on the bottom. Greatest return on investment in military history. Yet when the victory parades rolled, nobody threw flowers for the submariners. Their war was too quiet, too ruthless, and too classified. Most of the ultra code-breaking assists stayed secret for decades. So here's to the silent service. The guys who never saw a beach they had to storm, never got their pictures in Life magazine, but won the passive. September 2, 1945, USS Missouri, Tokyo Bay. The Japanese delegation signs the instrument of surrender. MacArthur gives his speech. The flags fly, and the world thinks the war is over. Nice story. The truth is, the shooting actually stopped 5 days earlier, in a quiet room on a tiny island most Americans have never heard of. Because of one last secret American mission nobody was supposed to survive. August 28, 1945, 16 exhausted U.S. Army paratroopers from the 11th Airborne Division led by a tough as nails major named Bob Flanagan land on a grass strip at Atsugi Airfield outside Tokyo. They're the first Americans inside Japan proper since 1941. No bands, no cameras, just M1 rifles and a single order: secure the airfield so MacArthur can land safely. They expect to die. Japanese officers had sworn to fight to the last man. Instead, they're met by a lone Japanese colonel who bows, hands over his sword, and says, "We have been waiting for you." The next 72 hours are the strangest in the entire war. Flanagan's tiny team drives into Yokohama in jeeps flying huge American flags. Crowds line the streets silent, stunned, some crying. They free thousands of Allied POWs from hellholes like Ofuna and Omori, walking skeletons who can't believe they're alive. One of the first men they liberate is a skinny Navy pilot named George Hugh Bush, shot down a year earlier. Meanwhile, up in Tokyo, another secret mission is already underway. On August 26, 6 days before the official surrender, a 6-man OSS team led by Captain Jack Cannon parachuted blind into Japan near a prison camp holding the Doolittle Raiders and other high-value POWs. The plan: rescue them before the guards can carry out the kill-all order that was already issued. Cannon's team lands in rice paddies, links up with Korean forced laborers who hate the Japanese more than they hate Americans, and storms the camp. They find the raiders half-starved but alive. The Japanese commandant commits seppuku on the spot rather than face the shame. The OSS boys load the prisoners onto ox carts and haul them to safety. By the time MacArthur steps off the plane on August 30th, the real war, the one with mass executions and last-ditch kamikaze strikes, is already over. The 11th Airborne and a handful of OSS operatives disarmed an empire with nothing more than audacity and perfect timing. Those 16 paratroopers at Atsugi and the 6 OSS guys in the rice paddies never got medals on the Missouri deck. Their report stayed classified for 50 years, but they were the ones who actually flipped the switch from war to peace quietly, professionally, and 5 days before the cameras showed up. So when you raise a glass to the end of World War II, remember, the last secret mission wasn't about dropping bombs. It was about showing up first, guns ready, heart steady, and daring the enemy to pull the trigger one final time.